say I'm really excited and very humbled to have this opportunity to speak to the community like this. I mean, I know it's a really informal setting, and I know pretty much anyone can give a presentation at Wellness, but, but really, I feel really honored to be able to share such an important topic, to have a platform to speak about depression. And first of all, I will say, like, this is the first time I've ever shared my story in public, so I don't know. There might be tears. I have no idea. It's a really vulnerable place for me to be, but I've also learned through my journey that the more I open up and speak about my experiences, the more healing I find in my own life. And
thank you for sharing.
Yeah, my hope is just that everyone who's here can have their understanding open. Like, I mean, I have no idea where. Okay, just with your personal experiences, if any of you have struggled with it in the past, if you have had people who are close to you that have struggled in the past, but I want this presentation to be geared towards you as well. So first of all, I wanted to ask, if you're just here because it's wellness and you just wanted to come, that's totally fine. If you're here because you wanted to know about this presentation, you have questions about depression, whether stuff that you've gone through or trying to help a loved one, I just want to go around the room quickly and say, what's one thing that you hope to learn here today? If you don't have anything, just say pass, that's fine. But that'll help me to gear my thoughts to answer your questions and speak to your heart too. So, yeah, Sandra.
Well, I guess I'd like to find out better ways to support people who suffer, family members as well as individuals who may not be really personal with.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, support. That's really important. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've taken antidepressants, so
All right. Well, thanks for just sharing that. I mean, that's a vulnerable thing to say. It's hard to admit that sometimes, but yeah, I'll address that. Anything to me about Pat?
Better be able to support clients as we do them, but also other people.
Awesome.
I think my questions have already been
Okay. Virginia.
Yeah, and I have people in my family that, suffer from depression, and the more you can learn about it, the better.
Yes. Education is key. One reason why is because the more you understand, the more you see the patterns, and the more you see that there are tools and ways to combat it instead of just being like totally clueless as to how to navigate this. So yeah, that's perfect. Miles?
Well, I'm assuming now that there's a balance between internal strength and external drugs and therapy, and so I'm wondering the pros and cons and the side effects of the drugs, and at what point you want to take what dosage and that sort of thing.
That's really good, and a question a lot of
people...
Can
you get through this on your own and forget the drugs, or...
Yeah, I've been on both sides, so I'll share
down
that.
Somebody's dead body after they're, like at what point do you want to...
Very good question.
Well, I kind of echo what other people say. I'd like to know maybe some ways to really effectively support friends and family who suffer depression. But I'm also wondering if there are ways that we as the Wellness Coalition can help. I have to tell you, Amie, that it saddens me as your friend, as a community member, to think about all the suffering that you went through, and that I wasn't there for you, and I'm really sorry about that. So ways that we can maybe not as an official thing, but if people can be more aware.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, I appreciate that just as your friend and being here in a community. And I know that's kind of a tricky thing to address because, you know, you are my friends, and it's hard to speak about it without feeling like some of you might take responsibility for either not being there or just so, like, first of all, just don't feel responsible whatsoever. Hopefully this will be a point that all of us can learn to know how to reach out. And I mean, first of all, it is such a tricky thing to navigate personally. Sometimes you don't even know how to talk about it, even with your friends. You don't know who will understand, who will respond with compassion, or who will respond with, you're just lazy, like, you know, pull up your socks and get it together, you know. So it's kind of a tricky balance. First of all, figuring out yourself what's going on, and then second of all, being able to relate with other people and find that support. And I'll address that in my story too. Thanks, Tim.
So I just came here for wellness, but I recently found out my daughter is on antidepressants.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's the same thing, but yeah, I struggle when it gets dark.
Yes.
Having any energy or motivation or anything.
That's a huge thing here in Alaska. I mean, just anywhere, you can still be affected by the darkness in the wintertime, the cold, the dark, just staying inside, all of that. But especially here in Alaska, it's just exacerbated a lot more because it's really intense, dark, and cold, and vitamin D is hard to come by in this state. Naturally, I guess, you know, you can take supplements, but okay, yeah, thanks.
I'm here to learn some more about how to support people who are struggling with it, because a lot of times they don't know what it is. From inside, it's hard to see the signs and realize, and so a lot of times it's your friends who may notice first and kind of peg it, and then have an opportunity to support and respond.
Yeah, yep. Thanks.
Well, I did what he did. I mean, I've actually had depression, didn't know I had it until just recently I realized I was coming out of it. So, yeah, just to help support people. And having a group locally, because sometimes they say, oh, well, maybe you go to Fairbanks Thompson. I soon talk to one of you guys versus going somewhere and talk to me. I don't know, you know, I think a lot of people are that way too. They just soon talk to somebody they kind of know.
And distance is a barrier, because, I mean, I know for me, especially as a young mom, I didn't feel like I even could get to Fairbanks because, you know, I didn't know who could watch my kids, or, you know, if everyone else was busy. Even if people were totally willing to watch my kids, I didn't feel like I wanted to keep burdening them, you know. But even if it's not a burden, it's all a mental game. Like, it's totally a mental game, and you just have thoughts that you never thought that you would ever have. So yeah, it's really hard to navigate sometimes. Well, thank you for your input, and that makes me feel better. Like, a lot of the stuff I had prepared, I hope will address a lot of those questions. So first of all, I wanted to share a little bit of my story to say, just to show how I got from, well, first of all, having no clue about depression, totally being one of those people that is like, it's just your attitude, like, get out and, you know, go serve someone, or get out, go on a run, and you'll feel a lot better. Like, I was that person, to now having gone through it myself and now being able to speak about it. There's definitely a lot of ups and downs in the roller coaster. It's a really in-depth story, so I'm going to try to condense it, but just kind of give the basics of how I got to where I am today. So first of all, like I said, growing up, I was one of those kids who was just like, I had a friend who struggled with depression, and I was really involved with trying to help her, but I really didn't understand that there is so much of a physiological and psychological thing. I really thought it was a lot of just, you know, encouragement and helping them to just feel better about themselves, giving them compliments, stuff like that. And I thought that that would be enough to get them out of it. she was suicidal. Luckily, she didn't take her life, but she came close several times, and that was really hard for me as a teenager to know how to navigate that. Later, as I went to college, I also had a really close friend and a roommate who was struggling, and honestly, I didn't even know, because I was so much in my happy-go-lucky bubble, and I knew that she was struggling, but I didn't know it was depression, like, all the time, every day. I would just kind of be there when she was really having a hard time and, kind of be a momentary support, but I honestly had no idea what she was going through until the end of the semester, and somehow it came out. Like, we were having a roommate kind of goodbye conference type of thing, and it came out that she had depression. I was like, what? I am so sorry. I did not know this whole year that that's what you were going through. And that affected me so deeply as a person, because I thought, how could I have not seen it? And why wasn't I there for you? And I was your roommate, So yeah, like a big shift for me through this experience that has taught me a lot in how to respond, how to recognize, just even how to be compassionate. So my first experience with depression came extremely unexpectedly. It was when I went on a mission trip, and this is one of those things that I had prepared for like my whole life. I was so excited to have gotten to the point where I could go out and go on this missionary trip to serve, to share the joy in my life and all this. And I was in a preparation course right before I went, and the instructor actually had a whole class just on depression and mental illness. And he said, it's really it's kind of difficult sometimes, because I can't remember the exact statistic, but he said, a certain percentage of missionaries, when they start to serve, they'll struggle with depression, because of the rigor of the trip, you're in a different place, you're not with your family, all those contributing reasons. And I literally had the thought in that class, good thing I'll never have to worry about that. I mean, maybe someone that I'm working with, maybe they'll struggle with it, but good thing I'll never have to worry about that, because I'm just this happy, optimistic, always just positive and resilient person. But I learned the signs, not only from that course, but my major is health and wellness, and so I've taken some courses just in college about stress management, all that kind of stuff. So I knew the textbook symptoms of what depression were. So fast forward to when I arrived, I was chosen to serve in Taiwan, which I was extremely excited about, because I had actually grown up there. So going back to kind of my home country to be able to serve the culture and the people that I loved so much was a huge privilege for me. And part of that, I think I really set myself up to have a mental breakdown, because I had such high expectations of myself. I had idealized this event my whole life, and I thought, I've prepared so carefully, I've worked toward this my whole life. I was just ready to hit the ground running and just help as many people as I could. So yeah, I didn't realize once I got there what a challenge it would be, and because I had such high expectations for myself, and this is something I was so passionate about. When the difficulties came, people either didn't want to listen, or they just didn't care about religion, or even people who were very open and wanted to learn, they just had their own life struggles that they were working through. And as a missionary, you're trying to help people work through these life questions and find the answers for themselves. It's just a very, very rigorous way to serve. And I honestly wasn't prepared for that, even though I thought I was so prepared. Okay. Sorry about that.
Sorry, guys.
So yeah, it was only, I think, 2 or 3 weeks of being in Taiwan, and I realized I had lost all drive to do anything. Even when the missionaries that I would go out with, even when we would just on our we called them preparation days, which was the day that we could just go out and do our grocery shopping, go out and do a hike, whatever. It was kind of our day to regroup so that for the rest of the week we could just go out and be focused on ministering. So even on our preparation day, my companion planned this amazing hike. I think back now and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was such a cool hike. But I had no desire to go. And that was a huge red flag for me, because I was totally an outdoors girl. And so that was probably the first time that I started to realize, okay, something is really going wrong here. I no longer have that, excitement and just energy to go out and do the stuff that I love. So yeah, it was only a couple weeks until I actually called the mission president, who is basically the supervisor of all the missionaries serving in that region of Taiwan. And I pretty much diagnosed myself because I had learned all the symptoms, and I was like, check, check, check. So I called him up and I said, I think I have depression. And he's like, really? Why? And so I told him, I have no motivation. I'm just totally out of energy. I feel sad, and I don't know why. Just all of these things. And he's like, yep, it sounds like you do. And I will never forget the way he responded. And he said, we are going to get you out of this. I am going to do everything within my power to help you through this. And that was probably one of the most powerful phrases I could have heard at that time, because I had no idea what kind of a journey I was going to be going on from that point through. But knowing that I had a person who was going to be very closely monitoring me, very closely working with me, getting me the resources that I needed. Honestly, looking back, I think that was the best place I could have come down with the depression, because I was in such a supervised state that I had someone with me 24/7. My companion was with me 24/7. I had a mission president who is directly responsible for my well-being, so of course he was going to do everything to help me. And just those words that we're going to get you out of this helped me feel love and support, as well as hope, even though hope is so elusive when you're in depression, that I felt like, okay, he told me that we're going to get you out, so I guess there is a way out, and he's going to be there with me to get me through. So that was a huge turning point. Finally, I know some people have a real battle with accepting the diagnosis, I guess, and this is something that is a struggle, not only for the individual themselves, but for the loved ones around them. If someone has denial that that's what they're going through, it's really, really hard to get them the proper support and treatment, because if they don't want to accept that it's a mental illness, then that's something that they have to come to terms with, and it might take time. So someone who's trying to support, recognize that it might take time for them to accept their diagnosis. For me, it had almost the opposite effect. I was very relieved to finally have a diagnosis because I could put a name to the things I was experiencing it, and it actually helped me externalize it, because then it wasn't like a personality defect. I wasn't going crazy, like what on earth was happening to me? I'm losing myself, I'm losing my personality, I'm losing my mind, I'm losing my heart. Where is it going and why? Then with this diagnosis, I'm like, okay, now I have something to work with. So I may be one of the few ones that was actually very relieved and happy to be diagnosed with depression. At that point, I was able to get medication that worked. I was able to get a counselor specific for missionaries. So a lot of things happened to help me get on the path to recovery. And I'm very happy to say that by the time I was about halfway done with my mission, I was finally able to kind of hit a turning point and come back out of it. So I did have a portion that I was really enjoying, I was present for, and I was able to really minister. So one of those critical turning points, though, was being paired with another missionary who had depression. And that was really interesting because when the mission president made that assignment, she had just moved into the apartment, so we were just getting to know each other, and she said, well, I might as well just tell you right now, because you're going to find out anyway, I struggle with depression. And at that moment, I was kind of paralyzed with fear, like, oh my gosh, how are two missionaries who are supposed to minister to other people that are both struggling with depression, like, how on earth are we going to make it? Why did our mission president think this is a good idea? But it was actually one of the most inspired ideas that I believe he ever had, because as she was opening up to me, I was asking her about, okay, so are you on medication? You know, how do you feel? Like, just tell me about it. And she looked at me, she's like, you seem to know a lot about depression. Like, do you have experience? Like, do you know? So at that point, I just took my bottle of medication off my desk and held it up. And, like, basically both of our jaws dropped, all barriers went down, and that was a critical turning point for both of us, I think, because we saw that it would really be a miracle for both of us to be able to get through this together. But the reason why that was so healing was because both of us could completely understand what the other was going through and be that 100% understanding support, because we understood what it was like for the other person to go through that. And so I, as another tip for someone who's trying to support them, I don't know if it's whether to find a way to connect them with someone else who is struggling, or to learn about it as much as you can yourself, what it feels like, and what really just what it feels like. That way you can be compassionate towards them and help to just, I guess, bear that burden, so to speak, because unless if the more you feel like you can connect with someone else, the more you feel that burden lessened. And to me, my companion was that, because I guess one other important thing is that when she started telling me about how she was feeling, I basically was just like, oh my gosh, what she is describing is exactly what I have been going through. And if both of us have had the exact same experience, you know, different experiences, I guess, but the same feelings, the same symptoms, all of that, that was another turning point for me where I realized this is not me, this is part of the disease. So that was another point where I was able to externalize it and see it as something that I could understand better by learning about it and learning how to manage it. That was a huge turning point to be able to externalize it and understand it better, that it's not just me, there's someone else who is experiencing it the same way. So here's the point where I kind of want to explain what it's like. There have been a lot of people who have explained it just feeling completely empty, completely numb, like you can't feel anything. And that's a really scary place to be, because you know that certain events should elicit certain emotions. You know, if it's someone's birthday, you know, like you should be happy to go to their party, but you don't feel anything. In fact, you feel isolated. You feel like a piece of glass is between you and the party, and you don't even know how to get in the party. Like, I don't know if that even makes sense, but you literally feel this block and you see everyone else is having a good time. Why am I not feeling this? Why do I feel so isolated? And like, what is wrong with me that I'm not experiencing the emotion that I should? Those are some of the mind games that you start to play with yourself. Just, you know, what is going on? What is wrong with me? That's one of the biggest things that just goes on over and over and over again. What is wrong with me that I'm feeling this way and I know it's not how I should be feeling right now? The way I describe it to people that I really felt as a missionary was I constantly felt like I was in this state of fear. I was in this extremely dark room, like a cement room with no way out, with no lights on, but filled with a pack of angry, hungry wolves. And I was just sitting there, huddled in the corner of this dark cement room, having these wolves surrounded me, like just, if you can imagine, just like gnashing their teeth and gnarling at you, just snapping and biting, and you know at any moment you could die. Or even if not die, but be brutally torn apart. That is a scary place to be. And it's totally psychological, but that is your reality. And an important thing to recognize is that when you're in that state of mind, it affects you physiologically. So it's no longer just thoughts, it's no longer just your imagination, it is your reality. And because the stress that's there, whether it's real or perceived, it affects you the same way physiologically. So that it's really important to understand that, because when you know that it's triggering this stress response within a person's body biologically, it no longer becomes only something that's in the head. It is now a physically manifested disease. And so really, it turns into a state of unrelenting stress. You're always in the fight or flight mode. Everything you experience, all your decisions are basically made off of fear, shame, guilt, all of these negative emotions that are then filling your mind. And like, not only is that a happy way to function, but it's not even a really functional way to function, if that makes sense. Like, all your decisions are basically irrational, or not based on truth, because you you live in this alternate reality that's full of negativity. Everything you see is through the lens of depression. So that those lenses, those glasses, are hard to take off. And honestly, you don't even know that they're there. That's what makes mental illness so tricky, because it's like they're glued to your face. It's a part of you. You don't know how to take those glasses off. And it's very distressing because you know something's wrong. You know there's a lot that's really just, I mean, it's a terrible world to live in, but you don't know how to take those glasses off. So anyway, fast forward then to, I came home from my mission, like, in a totally good place. And I went back to school. I started dating my husband. I was working towards graduation. I was only a year away, so it was like a really exciting time of life. And again, I was moving towards another milestone. Graduation, marriage, and getting ready to have a family, like all these things. It was just a really exciting time. So when I moved up here, so my husband and I got married like 3 weeks after my graduation, moved straight up here to Alaska, and I was just like so excited because I had moved around all my life. I thought, it's just going to be like any other move, and I had that resilient personality. I didn't realize that I would be setting myself up again for another mental breakdown because of that idealized, like I was just getting ready to have the perfect marriage, the perfect family. I'd waited all my life for this, and so I graduated, made a major move, got married, got pregnant, remodeled our house. Like, that's 5 major life changes, all within a few months to a year. And I totally thought that I'd be able to handle it. Well, come baby number 1, it didn't take long before my world crashed again. But this time it was really interesting, because I didn't recognize it as depression, even though I had been warned ahead of time that my counselor, when I was a missionary, he said, just be aware, when you have a baby, you are at risk. It might not happen, but you are at risk to have it come back as postpartum depression. And so I was very well mentally aware of that. I knew that it was more than likely going to happen, but it resurfaced so differently that I wasn't able to recognize it for 8 months. So the differences were, I was describing before how it was just like this dark box, like always just feeling completely trapped, isolated, like these angry wolves in the form of my thoughts were always eating at me, and there's just no escape. Whereas this time around, I did feel moments of joy. You have a new baby. Yes, it's overwhelming, but I was just happy to have this new baby. I felt, this joy coming in and kind of putting commas in the period of overwhelm. So I was like, you know what? It's not like before. I know what it feels like, but this is not it. Like, I feel happy sometimes, so I don't think it's really clinical depression. But it just got worse and worse. I realized that when I broke down crying because my baby was crying and I was just so exhausted to respond to my own child's needs, I realized that there was something really wrong, that I needed help, and this is not normal. But I still didn't know what it was. And it's just so weird. This is what I'm referring to when I'd say that it might take time for even the individual to realize what's going on. Even if you totally see it, they really have to figure it out themselves. You can definitely help them along the path, but it has to be an internal shift where they recognize what's going on. Like I said, it took me 8 months to figure it out. I thought it was just like sleep deprivation. I thought it was low iron levels, it was with unexpected weight loss. So there are a lot of physiological symptoms manifesting themselves here. And so that's also why I didn't really think it was depression, because it was affecting me so much physically. So I went to the doctor, I got a blood test, everything came back perfect. And I was actually really disappointed by that, because I'm like, I was expecting you to tell me what's wrong with me, and you tell me nothing's wrong with me, but something is terribly wrong. So like I said, it took 8 months to even figure it out, and really the turning point was my mom. She sent me an article about postpartum depression where it listed the symptoms. And again, I went, check, check, check. This is what's going on. Yeah, it's different from before, but this is exactly what's going on. And again, I had a name for it. That kick-started a whole journey for me to learn as much as I could about postpartum depression. And so because I was basically learning as much as I could, it helped me to find tools. I tried to find as many tools to cope as I could. But also another compounding factor at that point, I found out I was pregnant with baby number 2. So I had just learned what was going on, found out I'm having another baby, and honestly, I was scared to death. And I was considering medication at that point, but I didn't feel comfortable just because I was pregnant again. I didn't feel like that was the right decision, so I tried to find as many natural resources as I could. So essential oils, yoga, just movement in general, light therapy, getting a light box, vitamin D, counseling, like all of these things. I started to collect my resources, and I had a list of basically, just when I'm starting to have a breakdown, these are the things that I can do. And that helped. It really did. But it was still a daily battle. Every day was a battle. And that's really exhausting, especially when you're trying to carry the carrier for a new baby and be pregnant. So it was just a really intense time. Well, then again, fast forward to fast forward to when baby number 2 came. That was when I knew that as soon as I went home from the hospital, I was going to have another breakdown. I could feel it coming on. I could feel the anxiety mounting. I could feel the thoughts coming back. How am I going to function? All of a sudden, I'm going to be responsible for 2 babies. The first one was 17 months at the time, so he was still a baby. And so I just felt great anxiety, even about going home from the hospital. So I told the doctor how I was feeling, and I said, first time around, I got hit with postpartum depression. I know it's coming again. So he said, okay, let's get you right on medication. And that time I did feel right about it. I knew I wouldn't be able to just depend on that list of natural coping mechanisms. So that was a much needed extra step for me. So that comes to the question you had, Miles, about that balance between handling it naturally or on your own with exercise, diet, essential oils, whatever it is that you can do to manage it yourself and naturally, versus medical intervention.
What you're describing makes me think that there's possibly more than one type of depression.
Yes.
Because
yeah.
see myself as manic depression, and I equate it to a lot of artists who have an up and lots of inspiration with a crash, and it might have nothing to do with anything in the physical world, and that's what helps me. Is that whatever goes up has to come down. So when I'm down, the downer I get, the more positive I get, I say, because whatever goes up has to come down, so the converse is true. The more down I am, wow, am I going to have an up?
I'm going to have a good point.
So I sit there and smile and wait, and I go, man, I can't wait till I get on the upside. I'm going to get a lot of artwork done. But meanwhile, all I have to do is survive this.
Yes, and
that's
you
the single
really,
most important thing, is to survive.
Exactly. You are totally in survival mode. And, you know, like I said, the threat, the stressors may be completely perceived. You can be in a completely safe home. Like, for me, you know, I really was in a secure place. I had an incredible husband, really supportive, extended family, really, really good friends, but I didn't know how to connect with them. I didn't know how to express what I was feeling, and I felt that responsibility, like, I need to be okay in order to interact with public, because I felt that responsibility. I felt like a black hole, and I didn't feel like that was very nice to go out into public and be a black hole to suck other people's light out.
Josh says, if you haven't had a chance to already and happen to see this, perhaps sharing the difference between the blues and clinical depression would be helpful for those unfamiliar with this issue.
Okay, wow, awesome. My husband is involved. Like,
I'm just saying, I'm just repeating what he wrote.
Perfect,
so.
Thanks. So yeah, that's a really important thing to address, because a lot of people may feel like, okay, is this something that I'm going to be able to pull out of, or is this a clinical matter that I need intervention for? I read a book that described it in a way that I hadn't really thought of. Like, there really is a line between being able to handle it on your own and just, you know, with changing your thoughts, getting some counseling, maybe some changes in your life, get out and exercising more, and that would take care of it, versus really clinical depression where you're in a life-threatening stage. You could be driven to suicide if you don't get medical and professional intervention. I think a way to draw that line is if you feel like you're in that inescapable survival mode. Because when you're just down and blue, you're also, I feel like you're also able to think about your reality in a realistic way. You recognize what happened to cause, you know, whether it was a death of a really close loved one, or you lost your job, or even just like a breakup, or whatever, however significant or insignificant, you recognize, okay, this is a struggle, this right here in my life is a struggle, and I'm really struggling right now. But you're able to talk yourself through it. You're able to find hope. You're able to find relief. Whereas when you are in a clinically depressed state, those thoughts and emotions are toxic. You cannot talk yourself out of it, because the more you talk about it, the more you think about it, the deeper and deeper you drive yourself into that hole.
So does your spirituality have an effect? Because it does
Definitely.
with me. Because what I tell myself is, God does not give us a task that we cannot survive.
Yes.
He wouldn't do that. So we have to trust. So no matter how low we get, we just have to say, God wouldn't be having this happen unless there was a reason. And when I am back up, I'm going to find that reason. I'm going to be stronger.
Yes.
And that alone
and
can help.
I feel like spirituality is an incredibly important aspect, but also an incredibly difficult aspect when you're faced with depression, because depression attacks your identity. it attacks who you are as a person. You literally feel like you're losing who you are. You lose your passions, you lose your interests, you lose your vitality. You just feel dead inside. I guess that's another good way to distinguish it, is if you feel like you can still, connect with people, if you still feel like you can still do things that will bring you joy, that you just don't even feel that. You're literally dead and empty inside. And because of those toxic thought patterns, it begins to look like this. God has abandoned me. He doesn't love me. I'm not worthy of his love, and you don't know why. That was one of the things that was most distressing to me as a missionary, because I had prepared all my life to go out and serve, give 100% of my time for this, chunk of my life. It was a year and a half where I would be 100% doing God's work. And I really struggled with this question, why, when I was doing the best I could do spiritually, was I feeling the worst I have in my life, and I literally felt like I was going to go to hell. Like, who in their right mind, when they're doing good, serving other people, sharing, loving other people and sharing the good news, why would you feel like you're going to hell? And that's literally the mind games that go on in your head. And so because it attacks you as a human being, you feel distanced. Now, also on that note of, I feel like spirituality really was my anchor. Even though I felt those feelings were very real, that I had somehow really disappointed God, and because of that, this is what was happening. I was under condemnation.
You have to be in their shoes, and so I see that as the reason. In other words, if you've never been there, it's difficult to help somebody who feels like they're going to hell. If you've been there, you can put your arm around them and say, come with me and let's talk about this. If you've never been there, it's not going to come across as false, but they're going to say, you don't understand.
Exactly.
And if you can say, yes, I do, then that makes a big difference.
And that was the turning point that hit me, was why was I going through this? It was because God was trying to teach me how to be compassionate, how to really understand what other people were going through. Because before, I couldn't understand. I loved them. I really, really wanted to help, but I did not understand what it was like to be in despair, like true despair. I've never experienced that in my life. So even though at that time I couldn't feel God's approval, I couldn't feel his love, I didn't feel like I could communicate. Every time I prayed, it was like I was in this metal box and my prayers went up and bounced right back out. And it was really difficult to keep praying when you feel like there's that barrier. But I remember having this thought, okay, why keep praying? Like, what's the point? And then a distinct voice came to me saying, if you stop praying, you will cut off your lifeline. And so that was it for me. I knew that as soon as I stopped praying, then that would be it. Like, I would sink lower and lower and have no way out. So I kept praying, no matter how hard it was. And it was months before I started feeling that connection again. But I kept praying. And when I was able to come back out of it, looking back, I could literally see the ways that God had been carrying me through. I knew the angels had been around me, helping me, carrying me through that. And that is something I cannot deny. In that moment, I couldn't see it at all. But that's just it about mental illness. You don't see reality. There's this literal barrier where you cannot see the goodness that's going on around you. It's those glasses again. All you can see.
So what can other
what's
people
going
do
on.
who are your friends or who know people like this? What can they do if they want to step in? Remind you that things are going to get better? Be with you when you're down? I mean, what could, as those of us who want to step in and intervene?
I feel like that's where my husband comes in, if he's still watching. There are a few people in my life where I really felt connected to, like I could open up, really. The first one was my companion, when I knew that she would get it 100%. She knew where I was coming from, and she'd be able to respond with compassion. Another one was my husband, because I felt like I know it was really difficult for him, and he'd probably have a whole nother perspective to add on this, but I knew it was difficult for him to see me in that state where I could not see reality. So what he would do, which was really, really good, he would help me identify which thoughts were true and which were not. So basically, he was my soundboard. I would try to get all my thoughts out, because it was just eating away at my mind. All these thoughts, constantly ruminating thoughts that were just this downward spiral, and I needed to get it out. And that was really hard for him to take. But as I voiced those, he was able to see what was reality and what was not. So he could help kind of pull me out of that. And when I would say things like, I feel completely alone here, no one cares about me, I'm forgotten, he would say, that's not true. And you know that's not true. You know that every one of your family members would be there in a heartbeat if they knew what they could do to help. You know that people in this community care deeply about you. And when he would say that, I'm like, yeah, that's true. The feeling was still there, but I could then see, like, okay, yeah, you're right. That phrase, what I just spoke, was not true. So having that person to bounce off, and honestly, you do have to be careful about it, because here's the other part of that, is that you can't just discredit everything that they're saying. Otherwise, they'll feel, because it is literally their reality, they're just going to see that you're basically denying everything that you're experiencing. So it's a really fine line as the soundboard, person that you're talking to not deny what they're going through, but to help them process it, to distinguish what is truth and what is not. So first of all, be very compassionate. Understand that everything they are vocalizing is really what they're experiencing and what they're feeling. So validate them. Man, that must be really hard to feel that way. So, if you feel like everyone's abandoning you, like, I'm sorry, that's a really tough place to be. But here's how I see it, and you give that added perspective of what the reality of the situation is, so that they can start to see the dysfunction in their thought patterns. And that's really what one of the major things that it comes down to, is being able to work through the dysfunctional thought patterns that have become so ingrained in your thinking, that it's exaggerated thinking, it's all or nothing thinking, like either, like nobody loves me, nobody cares about me, like that's just not true. There's always some person who cares about me.
I thought about recording the good times, so that when I'm down, all I have to do is hit play.
Yeah.
I mean, I've joked about it, like somebody compliments my artwork. Like today, a spiritual person called me, he's dying. And he said, I have somebody that's read all 7 of your books, and they want to know when book 8 is coming out, and it changed their life. And I said, I should record that. So when I say, nobody's reading my book, who cares? I'm not making any money. I could hit play, and then over and over, oh, Miles, you're so wonderful. Oh, your books are so good. And then I would start to smile.
Yes. and that's another important thing is that when you're in this mode, you need constant reinforcement because everything that's going on in your head is beating you down, telling you you're doing everything wrong, you're a terrible failure, everything that you do is worthless or just wrong. You know, like you try to comfort your baby and they just keep crying and you're saying it's because I'm not doing it right, but you don't even know what you're doing wrong, if that makes sense. But that's the voice in your head telling you everything you're doing is not enough. Even when you try to do something good, you should have done it better, and you know you should have done it better. So even every positive thing that you're trying to acknowledge within yourself, it just gets shot down. And that was another turning point for me when I realized, because in my trying to learn everything about that I could about depression, one of the things that kept coming up was it's caused by either past trauma or chronic recurring trauma. And I literally just thought, what on earth has happened in my life that's so traumatic to trigger this experience? I've never been abused. I've had an incredibly good childhood. I feel very secure in my marriage, all of these things. And it took me months to figure out that question, but it was some radio show. I was on the way driving home from Fairbanks, and some mental health thing was on. And they were talking about the negative thoughts, and all of a sudden it clicked in my head. The chronic trauma that I have been experiencing is being followed 24/7 by a bully. And if you think about that, literally, if someone was following you every moment of every day, telling you everything you're doing wrong, how you're a terrible person, no one, everyone has forgotten about you, you're just in this on your own, you're making so many mistakes, you might as well just not try. How can anyone survive like that?
Do you ever see the famous quotes that are helpful to look over?
Yes.
Because I do that. I think about Edison, who 9,990 times failed. And the one time the filament worked for the light bulb, and that's what we remember. So I tell myself, I'm only on 9,900.
Yeah, so then that's another way to go about it.
The next one is going to be the light bulb.
Is you need to find ways, phrases or inspirational movies or talks or whatever it is that can give you that hope, because you really can't conjure it up within yourself. Normally, I think that this is another difference between the blues and clinical depression is when you're going through a rough time, you can usually find from within yourself some strength to go on, or motivation, or just by saying, really things are going to get better, I'll get through this. Whereas in clinical depression, it's all external. You have to find so many things externally to give you that light. I actually had a friend describe it once as, because inside you feel completely dark, she tries to gather as many lights around her, and even if she can't feel that joy and happiness, just being surrounded by it lifts her. So some of those lights are her dog, being with good friends, listening to something uplifting,
certain kinds of music even. I
Yes.
guess we're going to hear about that here in one of our talks.
Yeah, really anything that lifts you and rejuvenates you. Those are those lights that you need to constantly feed yourself with, because there's nothing inside you that you can elicit to light a candle. It all has to be external coming in. And so there's just stuff like that where you find those things that feed your spirit. One of the big things for me, and that I would really advocate for everyone who is going through a mental illness, is to find an avenue of creativity. that was an extremely healing experience for me. Number one, because it was a stress reliever. When I was participating in my creative avenue, which for me was doing woodblock art, just putting inspirational quotes on blocks so that I could have them around my house, and just crafting was very rejuvenating to me. I found ways to reduce the stress, to channel my inner energy into something productive, and just to, I don't know, like it really was just healing.
I heard that just the physical motion of doing something artistic where you had done it in the past and it was a positive experience. Yes. The motor movement of working the saw, lining up the blocks, the music, the lighting, the atmosphere was positive at one time, and your body remembers when you start moving your hands like this, and pretty soon that is capable of coming back again. Yes. I think that, so it isn't just in the head, it's a motor connection to the brain, which is being remembered.
And that's something that's really important to recognize, is that it's not just in the head. It is very much connected with your body physiologically. That when you come at mental illness and depression, you need to remember that there's the physiological, biological aspect. There's the psychological aspect.
So what do you think about saying to somebody who feels this way, go create something? And even though they don't want to, make them. Go say, go sit down and have that person make you go through, and I don't feel like it. Well, do it anyway, and then pretty soon it might help you bring it out.
I think part of that is, instead of just saying go do that because you know it's going to be good for you, they're thinking, I don't have time to do that. I am struggling to survive here. I cannot participate in that. That's the mental barrier that they're going through, and that's really what.
But if somebody walks you over and sets you down at the table and says, "Here, just try,"
that's where it comes from. The external support is to say something like, "Look, I'll take care of your kids. I'll take care of whatever. I'll take care of whatever your barrier is to giving yourself that time, so you can forget about all the stressors and have this time to yourself." And that's really, really hard to make that jump, and it might take time. Especially as a person coming from outside support, you may see very clearly what things will be able to help them. But that's what goes back to both my husband and another dear friend who I talked about with her experiences. She said her husband was really, really good at encouraging her to take care of herself. When she was having a breakdown, he would say, "Honey, just go take a bath. I'll take care of the kids. I'll do the dishes. I'll do, whatever you're stressing about, just forget about that. You go take a bath. Just, have your own time." Or he would also be encouraging, like, "Wow, I'm really proud of you for taking your vitamins today. Like, that's really good. You did a good thing there." And it might sound pretty petty, and you don't have to be fakey about it, but really reinforcing every time they do something to take care of themselves and to do something that will help to relieve that stress, you reinforce that. Let them know that they do have the time to do that, and that you're going to be there to remove that stress. Like, I don't know, does that make sense? Like, for me, a big part was I became very obsessive about sleep, because, like, one of those replaying thoughts was, when am I going to be able to sleep next? Because having 2 kids, one that's nursing, like, you don't get consistent, well-rested sleep. And so that was one of my thought patterns that would be completely debilitating to me. All I could think about was, when was I going to get my next nap? And so if whatever would come up between me and nap time would then then become a trigger and a debilitating thing. Like I would just shut down if someone said like, okay, we need to go help this person, or we need to do this, whatever it was. I'm thinking that's one more barrier between me and my sleep time, and I would shut down. I would break down into tears, like all of that. And so when I started to realize that sleep, my body was trying to tell me I need sleep to be able to heal, then my husband was really good at saying like, honey, just go take a nap. And when I woke up from my naps, I was way better able to handle the stressors. It didn't fix everything. Like, I was still really, really clinically depressed, but whatever that immediate trigger was then gone, and I was able to kind of reset after that nap and kind of cope on from there. So whatever you can do as an outside support to identify what it is that they need, and even if you can see whether that you need to go just create, or you just need a nap, or how about you just go for a run. You'll feel so much better after a run. Try to talk with them about what is keeping you from doing that. Why won't you just sit down and do this thing for yourself? And then when that person says, well, look, I have to take care of the kids. I need to make dinner. I need to blah, blah, blah. Then you just say, I got it covered. You go do whatever you need to do to be okay. And that is incredibly powerful and incredibly healing, because then they're able to drop that stress and move forward with that.
I'd really like to enforce that, because bipolar runs in my family. I have siblings and children and all sorts of things. And my daughter is a pediatric nurse, and she struggled with that bipolar for about over a year. But she was so fortunate because her job supported her getting well. And as you get, and of course you run out of all your leave, and all this sort of thing. Yeah. And then you feel guilty because you're not, pulling your own weight and all that. Yeah. But her boss would say, if Brooke needs days off, she gets the days off.
Yeah, that's
incredible. It is. It's very unusual. She is so fortunate to be in that position. And it's you don't like to take days off when you don't have any leave and all that sort of thing. But I think that's we think of, well, the family has to take care of this person, but it isn't. It's actually a community, bosses. If you have somebody who's falling apart at work, and you're the supervisor, you need to try and find out why, and maybe there's something that could assist them to take the load off. And
usually it's not the thing that just happened that's actually causing that problem. Maybe that episode at work may have been caused by a conflict between two employees, and they just lost it, but really what they need is a break, just so that they can remove themselves, take the time to reset, do yoga, creativity, whatever it is that person needs to drop the stress levels, and then they'll be able to come back and be productive again. But if you keep putting on that pressure that, like, what are you doing? Like, you just need to get it together and keep going. That is one of the most detrimental things that you can do. When someone is having a breakdown, you cannot expect them to just, like, get over it and go. Like, they need a break. And that was something that was really good as a missionary, because it was always constantly go, 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 go. When I was with other companions that didn't know what depression was like, they would be compassionate. They really would be. And they'd, just sit with me, just be okay. But then they'd be like, okay, well, we just need to get back to work. We have an appointment. Like, we're supposed to be to someone's house to help them. And so I would just say, like, okay, I have to do this. This is my role. And I would just shut down emotionally, because I had to be okay in order to be in public. And when you do that, you just keep burying the problem deeper and deeper and not addressing it until it comes out in an even bigger emotional breakdown. So what my what this companion would do when I was having an emotional breakdown, we would just sit at lunch for an extra hour and we would just talk it out. And even just like saying what was stressing me out and her saying, yeah, like that's really hard, you know, we should figure out how to address that and all that stuff. I was like, okay, well, let's get back to work. Like, I was ready to go back to work just by taking that extra time to sort things out and be okay. So I think that's another critical role that, you know, the people around you can take on is to either be with them to help them work through that or give them the time to work through it so that they can come back ready to interact again.
So what does medication do to help the situation?
Yeah, that's another important question. So this is how I define my experience basically. Before, when I didn't feel comfortable going on medication, I was doing everything that I possibly could naturally, just, you know, basically stress reduction, you know, that kind of stuff. It helped relieve the pressure momentarily, but it was still, every day was a struggle. Like, every day it was a battle. Whereas when I went on medication, once it kicked in, it was like 4 weeks until it kicked in. I literally woke up one day and I was free. And I thought, what on earth happened? Like, I'm myself again. That was actually around Christmas time, after Kenneth was born. And a friend had invited us to a Christmas party. And I was actually really excited to go. They were having a cookie making contest, and whoever made the best cookies was going to win. And all of a sudden I'm like, I am so going to win this thing. I started making cookies, and I made like 4 different kinds of cookies, and that was not what I was capable of before. It was almost like something, a flip, a switch just got flipped, that I was back to my normal self. I loved making cookies as a kid. But to me, once I hit that stage, like, I'm a mom now. I don't have time to do the things that I loved before because there's so many things that are taking care of my time.
What are the side effects of the medication and the cost
Yeah.
and the legality?
So that was the other side of the other part. Like, once I hit that switch, I literally felt like I had my life back. And I was like, wow, like, I'm just free. Well, then once things kind of evened out, it was probably another 2 or 3 weeks. Like, I was really on a high for about 2 or 3 weeks. I was like, this is great. Like, I'm back to normal. I can go. But then it kind of like dipped back down again, and I was like, oh no, did the medication stop working? Like, what's going on here? But what I realized was the medication helps stabilize your mood so that you can feel a normal range of emotion, not just always down here, or when you come out of it, then it's up here. Like, it brings you back into the middle ground where you can experience life in a normal way. So yeah, it's not a happy pill. It's not going to make life just, you know, fantastic again. And you really think that when you're coming out of it and you start to take medication, you're like, okay, this medication is going to make me happy and it's going to make my life better. Well, no, it's not. It's just going to bring you back to a steady state so that you can experience a normal range of emotions and so that you can bounce back when you do take a dive. So that was also the point where I started to experience side effects. And there weren't a lot of side effects, but there is one that was really, really, really bothering me. And, like, I don't know, it's kind of hard to say this in public, but it was with sexuality. Like, I didn't respond. Like, I had no sex drive whatsoever. And at first, I just thought, like, oh, it's just because of the depression or just because I'm tired. Yeah, actually, that was the thought that I would think. Like, I'm just a mom. I've been up with the kids all night, you know, breastfeeding, all this stuff. I'm just tired. Like, sorry, I'm just tired, let me sleep. But then when that went on and on and on, and even when I wasn't tired, I still couldn't respond appropriately, I was really bothered by that. And that started another emotional roller coaster where I was like, what is going on? Like, why am I not interested in my husband? And, like, that's just not normal either. It did take me a while to realize that was the medication. So it kind of triggered another set of insecurities to me because I didn't know where that was coming from and why. And that's why I just attributed it to the fatigue. But I don't know, it was probably another 8 or 9 months before we figured out it was the medication. And then we were able to work through that as a couple to say, like, okay, obviously it's not just you and being tired, it's a side effect of the medication. And then something that really, it was like the most incredibly compassionate way that my husband could have responded, is that it really doesn't matter to me if we're intimate. What matters to me is that you're okay. And that was one of the best things he could have said to me, because then I felt that pressure relieved, that, okay, like, he's gonna be okay. If I'm not doing okay, like, he'll be able to work through it. I just need to be okay. And as soon as he just let me know that, it was a turning point where I was like, okay, yeah, it really stinks. Like, even I want to be able to be intimate, but it just wasn't happening for whatever reason. And then it helped me be able to work through that. So it was a trade-off. And there were points where I would say, I just want off. Like, this is affecting me so much and our marriage so much. I want off. And I tried it. And about 4 weeks later, when the medication was out of my system, I had such a bad crash that was even worse than before. And I had some suicidal thoughts, and I vocalized that to my husband, who was like, okay, we need you back on medication. And just even him vocalizing that to me, understanding what it was going to do to the intimacy, was like, okay, he's okay with that. What really matters to him is that I'm okay. And so I went back on it, and yeah, the side effects returned, but I was okay. As a person, I was able to function. I could respond normally to people, just, So it really is a trade-off. There is no silver bullet.
I was thinking about health, like liver damage or making you sleepy or some other physical, like it's a poison. What's it doing to your body?
Yeah, it really affects people so differently. It totally depends on the medication. It depends on how you respond to it. It depends on just how you are able to, even what other coping mechanisms you're using to supplement that, because medication alone won't fix it. You still need to take care of yourself. You need to, do whatever it takes to relieve that stress and have those coping mechanisms that you're still using them even when you're on medication. But you like, for me, I didn't need to use them every single day, like every hour, having these breakdown moments where I needed to go do yoga or take a nap or just do some therapy, and so I was able to get to that point where I was only occasionally needing those tools, and that was life-saving to me. Yes, yeah, it was a prescription. I'm still on it. And that's another barrier that I need to cross, because I still don't want to be on it, but I'm at a point where I'm at a steady state. And if that's the stepping stool that it's going to take for me to be okay and just function as a normal human being, then that's still where I need to be. What I recognize, though, is that it's not a permanent thing. I don't want to be on medication my whole life. I don't believe that I will need to. But whatever it is that I still need to work through, I need to figure out what that is and how to work through it so that I can remove that underlying cause. I haven't figured it out yet. I've figured a lot of things out, and I'm doing way better, but, it's still a journey.
Yeah. When it comes to medication, if you've been around people that have mental health issues, you can see how much medication helps, and we're not talking about tranquilizers.
Yeah.
And bipolar is a really good example. They find out a therapeutic dose of lithium, which is just an element on the periodic table, and they have to manage that, and it has certain side effects. But in a sense, there's very few people who live, say, as long as I do, and I'm not that old, of course, but that don't need any kind of medical assistance. Because for the first time in my life, I'm on medication for a high blood pressure. It doesn't bother me, but it bothers the physicians. I don't take it, and so I'm dependent upon a drug in order to be healthy.
Yeah.
And I think in our society we make a distinction between mental health, which has a lot of physiology involved in it. It isn't just your thoughts. I mean, your thoughts are terribly dependent
very
upon
physiologically involved.
It is, but we make this dividing line between, say, high blood pressure and all these other things that affect your mood that can be alleviated greatly with medication.
Yes.
And I don't think that's quite fair.
Yeah, it is a hard thing to draw that line, to the point where how much and how long do I need to be on medication in order to be able to just function?
Yeah.
So obviously we're out of time. If anyone wants to keep talking about it, I'm more than willing to keep offering. But really quick on that line of depression, medication. Medication was the tool that got me to a mental state where I could even begin to address the underlying symptoms. Whereas before, when you're in that state of survival, you do not have the mental capacity, you do not have the emotional stamina, you do not have the physical, energy to even begin to address the underlying issues, which are, some of them could be, past trauma, some of them could be, definitely a part of it is the dysfunctional thought patterns. Some of it is getting the proper nutrition. I mean, as a new mother, I was very depleted in certain nutrients because I had just given it all to my baby and still was through nursing. So I was very nutritionally depleted, and as soon as I put certain vitamins that are especially good for mental health, back into my diet, that was also an incredible clicking point. So it is very physiologically and emotionally involved. So when you see medication as that stepping stool to get to the point where you are okay and able to then work on the underlying causes, that's really what helped me out, is because then once I was able to resolve those things, I could function so much better as a person. Without that medication, I would still be in a survival state. There's so much. It's a really complex, complicated issue. But in the end, I'm working on writing a book to get all this experience and learning out. And so really the best thing that we can do as a community is to keep the conversation going. Just reach out to people if you see they're struggling. Reach out to them, just ask what you can do, and even if they don't know what you can do, just do something that can give them time to be okay themselves. Whether that's I'll watch your kids while you go to a yoga class or while you take a nap. That's really, really good to help them be able to reset.
Thank you,
yeah,
Amie.
yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for being here.